Hello there, welcome along to Back Pages tonight here on Sky Sports News, bringing you a first look at the sports stories in the morning's newspapers. Joining us are The Guardian's sports writer Jonathan Liew, whose holidays we've interrupted, no less, and The Times football reporter Charlotte Duncker. Welcome to both of you. Let's take a quick look at some of the papers just reaching us. The Guardian reflecting on Rúben Amorim's comments on his impending move to Manchester United, calling it a soap opera. Joe Marler apologises for his comments over the use of the Haka. It's caused a major stir as England prepare to face the All Blacks this weekend. That story is picked up on a lot of the back pages. The Mail also lead with Amorim's comments today as a deal edges ever closer. They too also mark Jamie George's response to Joe Marler's comments over the Haka, who says he's prodded the bear. But there really is only one place to start. Let's start with Rúben Amorim. The soap opera is coming to an end, is what it says in the Mail. And we'll come to you first, Jonathan. It does feel a little bit like this has already dragged on for a bit. It's a matter of when rather than if now.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, a slightly interesting choice of words by Rúben Amorim there. I think the whole point of soap operas is that they don't end, that they just keep going indefinitely. And I think he's going to find that if and when he takes the Manchester United job, that it is really just a revolving cast of characters and plot lines and intrigue and controversies and people getting bumped off unceremoniously, and at some point it may well be him. Yeah, I mean, I think that there is a good reason why this is dragging on. There are good sporting reasons, pun fully intended, in that this is a guy who has been in charge of sporting for 4.5 years, the longest serving coach at the club since the Second World War, and he's inspired this incredible sense of loyalty, and he has this strong sense of responsibility, I think, to the club that gave him his chance early in his career, that he's repaid that faith, and he wants to do the right thing by them. So he's going to stay with them for the game tomorrow night. He's going to stay with them for the Manchester City game in the Champions League, and then through the international break, and then take over United in late November. And I think that's the kind of guy that United seem to be hiring. People talk about his personal skill. People talk about the bond that he forms, the loyalty that he inspires. And I think this is really just another example of it. He's not going to leave Sporting in the lurch. He's not just going to walk out on them mid-season and leave them finding a new coach with, on the eve of a big league game.
Charlotte, it's been 11 years since Sir Alex Ferguson left Old Trafford, and throughout that time, they've been trying to find their Pep Guardiola, their Jurgen Klopp, a man who can be at the helm for a long time, bring United the success that both Klopp and Guardiola did at their respective clubs. What I would say is this feels like a sort of line in the sand, a blank canvas, that Ineos have identified this man as the man that they want in the job. I interviewed Kasper Schmeichel last year, who had been at Nice, who Ineos also owned. He said, look, these guys are seriously impressive. Everything they touch turns to gold. Sir Jim Ratcliffe and Sir Dave Brailsford, if they've identified Rúben Amorim as the man they want, they'll have done so for good reasons.
Yeah, of course. I mean, you're talking about a manager who's one of the most highly regarded young managers across the whole of Europe. But I think the problem that you've got with Manchester United is you talk about a line in the sand there. I get what you're saying in terms of Ineos have arrived. There seems to be this whole new culture. Everything's changing behind the scenes. They've brought in all new sporting directors. Everything behind the scenes has changed. But this is still Manchester United, and fundamentally, you're right, they haven't managed to replace Sir Alex Ferguson. And I thought Erik ten Hag was interested in what turned out to be his final pre-match press conference. He said the level of expectation at that club sets you up to fail. I think there is just this expectation that they should be challenging for the title every single season, because that's what they did for so many years under Ferguson. But if you look since he left, the level that they're at isn't there anymore. So maybe expectations need to be changed. I think Amorim coming in, he's going to come in with his own ideas. He's going to come in with his own staff. But ultimately, the remit is exactly the same. It's to get Manchester United back to where they believe that they should be, which is competing for Premier League titles, which we haven't seen them do for a really long time. So the pressure is on him. He's young, he's enthusiastic. I like that he said the soap opera is coming to an end. If he's moving to Manchester United, it's only just beginning. There's so much scrutiny on him all of the time, and there always seems to be a drama associated with them, whether they're winning or losing. So if he thinks this is the end of this soap opera, it's really only just the beginning for him.
It's only just getting started. Jonathan, as Charlotte sort of alludes to there, you can change the manager. That doesn't change the quote-unquote shambles that is going on at Manchester United. That remains the case. However, what I would say is, if you look at a club like Chelsea, for example, you could also call them, basket case, I suppose, would be the unfair way of describing what Chelsea are like. But Enzo Maresca has turned things around super quickly, so there's no reason why Rúben Amorim can't do exactly the same thing.
Okay, we'll give Maresca half a season at least to see how sustainable that is. I mean, in many ways, the paradox of United, and for a few years after Ferguson left, they were still able to buy players at the top of the market. Think of guys like Angel Di Maria or Paul Pogba. They were still able to attract the best players in the world. They're not able to attract those players now, and yet the players that do come in are still being saddled with the expectations of being one of the best in the world. So you get a guy like Joshua Zirkzee comes in, who's not a finished article by any stretch of the imagination, and he is being asked to play like a world-class player from the start. The expectation on a new United player is of someone who can make an instant impact, who can be world-class immediately, and yet they are not able to sign that caliber of player anymore to match the expectations that they have. That's I think one of the first things Amorim is going to have to address. There was a cautionary tale, from his sporting career. So they bring in Marcus Edwards, who you might know as the former Tottenham player, and he's sort of integrated into the team. Amorim identifies him as a kind of introvert. He's someone who needs a bit of guidance. He needs a bit of help. He integrates him into the team, gives him substitute appearances over the course of about 6 to 9 months. And by the end of that period, he's becoming a Champions League goal scorer, and he is the player, with his potential unlocked. Now, at United, does a new signing, and a January signing as well, get that sort of time to integrate? Or are they being crushed almost immediately under the need? Someone like Ugarte, who's played, I think, 8 games, and people have said, well, he's got it, he hasn't got it. People are writing him off. People are writing off Zirkzee. That's, I think, the biggest problem that any United manager has to solve, how to deal with that tyranny of expectation when you are no longer attracting the caliber of player worthy of those sorts of expectations.
Yeah, Ugarte, a player who played under Amorim as well, of course, at Sporting. Charlotte, the Eye reports on this, and a number of other papers pick up on it as well. This long delay that Manchester United are going to have before he's actually in the dugout. It could be November the 24th against Ipswich before he's actually finally there in person. It's a bit of a strange situation, really.
Yeah, I think they've tried to do Amorim wants to do his best by Sporting, and as part of the agreement between the two clubs, they've said that he can stay for the next 3 games. They've got a game tomorrow night, they've got a game against Manchester City next Tuesday in the Champions League, and then he'll take charge of his final league game just before the international break, and then we expect him to fly over to Manchester and begin his preparations for his first game, to be that game against Ipswich. So that means Ruud van Nistelrooy is interim head coach at Manchester United for the next 3 games. Was at his press conference today, and he was saying he's motivated to do well, and he also wants to stay at the club beyond his interim spell. He was obviously brought in the summer as an assistant manager. He was given a 2-year contract, so he's still got a 1.5 years left on that. And he said, as far as he's concerned, he wants to stay. But we know as part of these negotiations that Manchester United have been having with Sporting, they've been trying to agree a fee so that Amorim can bring his coaches with him. So he'll no doubt be bringing an assistant manager with him, a goalkeeping coach, maybe a couple of analysts. That's all been part of the agreements that Manchester United and Sporting have been trying to reach over the last couple of days, which is why it's maybe taken longer than some people expected. So what Ruud van Nistelrooy's future is going to look like at Manchester United beyond the international break, nobody knows just now. But at the minute, he's the man that's trying to steady the ship at Manchester United, and they've got Chelsea at Old Trafford on Sunday, which is a massive game for them.
Jonathan, Charlotte leads me beautifully on to the question I was going to ask you, actually, because Ruud van Nistelrooy seems fairly certain he is going to be part of Rúben Amorim's backroom team. But, football nowadays, it's not just a manager you're signing. He brings his whole entourage with him as well. Are you as confident as Van Nistelrooy seems to be that he'll still be at Old Trafford in 3 weeks' time?
Well, I guess he would know better than I would. The case that when a manager is sacked, their whole staff generally go with him. Doesn't, I mean, it's a slightly different case because he hasn't obviously been in the setup for that long, and in many ways he's not as tarnished with the same brush as Ten Hag. And then there is also that club connection there. You know, there is, I think, a certain sense of unfinished business there on his part. There is well documented a lot of regret on Van Nistelrooy's side at how things ended with Alex Ferguson at Manchester United in the mid-2000s. I think he later, personally called Ferguson to apologise for his behaviour towards the end of his spell at the club. And I do think there is a kind of emotional pull there. He wants to hang around and stay and see how this new project works out, and he wants to be part of this new era at United for, I think, more than professional reasons. So I think all that's going to be taken into account. I don't know whether Amorim, where Amorim sees him in his plans, but I think it would be not the worst idea to have someone on the staff with some connection to the existing staff and also some cultural and historical connection to the club as it used to be.
Yeah, exactly. And Charlotte, if it is just an interim spell, he's off to a decent start. He scored more goals in the first 39 minutes last night than Erik ten Hag did in his last 5 Premier League games. And it seemed like a weight had been lifted last night with Manchester United. And you were at that press conference, as you said, today. Is he impressive, Ruud van Nistelrooy? Does he carry himself impressively? Can you see him perhaps having designs on that job, the top job, if not now, then 2 or 3 years down the line?
Yeah, I think maybe now is too soon to be talking about Ruud van Nistelrooy being Manchester United's permanent manager. We obviously know he's not going to be the next permanent manager, but he's been a manager before, hasn't he? He was manager at PSV. He won a trophy there. He's clearly got the credentials there. And I just think, obviously, they won last night. He's got another 3 games to maybe remind people of what he's capable of. He left PSV. He wasn't in work when he came to Manchester United. He can show maybe other suitors what it is that he's capable of doing. I think maybe Manchester United is the only job that he would take as an assistant manager. I think he was asked in the press conference what's next for him. He didn't really answer that. He doesn't know at the minute. Obviously, he's contracted to Manchester United. He wants to stay there in his role as assistant. But going forward, he has been a manager in the past. No doubt he'll want to be a manager again in the future. So these next 3 games, he could really show what he's capable of, especially if he could get good few results. And most importantly, like you said, get them back scoring again, which is something they were really struggling to do under Erik ten Hag, but they didn't seem to have a problem with that last night.
They are the gift they keep on giving Manchester, aren't they? We never seem to stop talking about them. I'm sure we will for a few more days yet. Welcome back to Back Pages tonight, and welcome back to the Guardian sports writer Jonathan Liew and Times football reporter Charlotte Duncker. Let's get to, I think this is a cracking story, Joe Marler's controversial comments about the Haka, which he since had to row back on. He said it should be binned. Jonathan, I think this story can probably be best summed up as Joe Marler being Joe Marler. He is a professional wind-up merchant, and he's done probably just what he wanted to do this time. Charlotte, I think Jonathan might have lost us momentarily. I'll come to you for that one. But Joe Marler has previous in this. He sees it as his job to get under the skin of various opponents over the years, and it certainly seems to have worked with the All Blacks.
Yeah, I think that's exactly what he's doing. As you say, he's rowed back, hasn't he? He's put that apology out on Twitter saying he didn't mean anything negative by it. He respects the New Zealand culture. He respects what it is that they do before these matches. And it's just triggered a whole debate, hasn't it, about the Haka and whether it's outdated, whether they should be doing it or not. I know Jamie George, who's obviously the England captain's come out and says he respects the tradition of it. But yeah, it was Marler that said it was ridiculous and it should be binned, which he has rowed back on a little bit. But like you said, that's in keeping with his character, isn't it? And he's been accused of prodding the bear. So it's going to be interesting to see on Saturday just if it stokes the fire a little bit and how New Zealand react to those comments.
Yeah, I mean, Jonathan, he's since sort of, as I said, rowed back and sort of said, I didn't mean any malice. I'm just saying that, perhaps other teams should be allowed to react to the Haka without being then sanctioned for that. I mean, it's actually quite unlike Joe Marler to be so contrite and actually apologise for something rather than just double downing.
Right. I mean, because you see that you showed the front page of the Times earlier, and there's the guy basically in the New Zealand. He's been almost on their 10-metre line.
That's right.
Physically, the guy closest to that is Joe Marler.
Yeah.
At the World Cup, and he apparently didn't realize. He thought the team instruction was basically to circle them like some kind of Wild West rodeo or something. I think it's that plan in 2019 was, it was concocted by Eddie Jones. It was done sort of collectively, and it was a collective attempt to get into the heads of New Zealand. And you have to say it worked. This, I mean, I don't know whether he had, one too many non-alcoholic shandies of an evening and he's let his fingers get away with him. But, it feels a bit more like almost like a lone wolf attempt to get into New Zealand's head, which I think has actually betrayed the very opposite. The problem with the Haka for teams that oppose it is you can oppose the Haka, you can counter it, you can do whatever you want, you can perform your own traditional cultural dance before a game in order to showcase your own culture and values. England doesn't have one of those. Most countries don't. This country has basically outsourced its culture to reality TV, so we don't have anything similar. And I think that's been a problem. That's a problem for any team that plays New Zealand, because obviously they get a psychological advantage from it, and there is no easy way of trying to row back on that psychological advantage. And you get teams who are, David Campese kicking a ball around. You get more coordinated attempts like this, and you get people, I think, just lashing out at it because it's been a problem for New Zealand's opponents for decades now. And I think the Joe Marler's, I think, betrayed the fact that he's let it get into his head a little bit.
Yeah, I'm aging myself terribly here because it was 1989 at Lansdowne Road in Dublin where Willie Anderson famously faced down the Haka, and of course Ireland went on to get beaten fairly heavily by the All Blacks that day. But it was a huge controversy at the time. No one dared defy the Haka, and there does seem to be a little bit too much reverence for it, I think, sometimes, Charlotte. I think that's where Joe Marler is perhaps coming from. But it is great theatre, and you can guarantee that 82,000 people will be in their seats at Twickenham 5 minutes before kickoff because they want to see the Haka. Rather than getting another pint, they want to see the Haka because it's part of the show.
Yeah, exactly. It's history, it's tradition. I don't really, personally, I don't see any problem with it. I reckon that most of the England team don't see any problem with it either. Does it really intimidate them that much? Maybe it doesn't have the same impact that it used to have in the past, like you said there. But I think if you're professional sports people, I think you're capable of standing there watching someone do something that they believe is right for them in terms of the Haka, in terms of New Zealand doing that. The England team can stand and watch there and not let it psychologically damage them, and also not be offended by it either. I just think, maybe it was just a bit clumsily worded by it, and it sparked this big debate about whether the Haka's outdated and whether it should be scrapped or not. But if it's a tradition and a culture in New Zealand and they want to continue to do it, then I don't really see any problem with it, to be honest.
Yeah, you say clumsily worded. I tend to think Joe Marler knew exactly what he was doing, to be honest. And Jonathan, as I said, there have been a number of teams over the years who have responded. And I remember Ryan Jones' Wales team just stood their ground and refused to move until the All Blacks took a backward step. I remember Sebastian Chabal in the 2007 World Cup sort of famously staring it down, and France dressed in the tricolour in the halfway line. So there have been teams that have responded to the Haka. It's funny, if you look back on some YouTubes...
Very few of them involve a smartphone, right? There are smart ways of opposing the Haka or responding to it, and respectful ways that don't involve, tweeting something on your own.
Yeah, exactly. It's funny, if you look back like sort of YouTube footage of Hakas from the 80s and 90s, it wasn't nearly as intimidating as it is these days. I think they put aside like half an hour at the end of every training session to rehearse their Haka, and it is pretty impressive in the flesh. Jonathan, if you've ever seen it.
Yeah, I mean, it's very clever. It's obviously it's part marketing, it's part self-branding. It's almost a kind of a cultural attaché these days. That whenever any sort of New Zealand trade delegation goes onto it, they take a Haka with them. It is an incredible piece of branding, but it also poses a problem for opponents, and I think that's the main reason why it's caused such controversy.
Charlotte, we're going to move on from Joe Marler and from the Haka. Let's head back to football. We've spent plenty of time chatting about the red half of Manchester. Let's chat about the blue half. And Pep Guardiola saying this is the worst injury crisis he's ever experienced in his entire time at Manchester City. I mean, it's hard to feel much sympathy when you've got the standard of players that Pep Guardiola has, when you've won the amount of things that he has. But it does seem as if it is a bit of a crisis he's facing.
Yeah, yesterday after the game, he said he's only got 13 players fit, which is a crisis, isn't it? I think the problem Guardiola's got is we know that he likes to work with a really small squad. And when you get a few injuries, which they have at the moment, then it leaves them really, really short. So it's one of those where you'd think, really, is he really being honest about that? But if you look at the first team squad players, there are only 13 of them currently fit. But as that story says on the back of the Sun there, Kanji, who went off in the warm-up yesterday with a bit of a calf strain, has said that he is going to be fit for this weekend's game. So that'll be a boost, taking him from 13 to 14 first team fit players. But like you said, there's so much quality in that squad. I think we all just expect Manchester City, whatever team it is that they field, whoever they've got on the bench, just to be able to see these games out. I know obviously they got knocked out of the Carabao Cup last night by Tottenham, but in the league, they're still going strong. They're still competing. They've got 3 games now before the international break, which they're going to have to try and get through that with a threadbare squad and then hope they can get some more players back in the international break.
And I have to say, as a Spurs fan, watching it last night, the teenagers are pretty impressive at Manchester City as well. I was biting my nails for the last half hour of that game. So it is, Jonathan, hard to feel that much sympathy for Pep Guardiola when, as Charlotte says, he's kind of created a rod for his own back. He likes to have these small squads. And if you have small squads, then you can have fewer players to choose from.
Yeah, and the thing is, you have players who basically perform multiple roles. And Akanji, particularly on Akanji, is such an important player for City because him and Ake, I think, are the only 2 centre-backs that Guardiola really wants defending one-on-one against transitions. And part of the reason they've been done on the transition so often this season is because Ake and Akanji have missed so many games this season. Obviously, Diaz and Stones, and they can do it, but it's not their strength. So having Akanji back, I think, it doesn't sound like a huge, it doesn't sound like a huge, against guys like De Bruyne or Rodri or some of their other absentees. But I think it's a really big player for them to get back if he is fit.
Yeah, absolutely. I think we've just got time to look at this story about Crystal Palace as well. The Sun, a number of papers to talk about it. Football financier Keith Harris spearheading a bid to buy a 45% stake in the club, a deal that could be worth close to £200 million. Charlotte, they have always struck me, Crystal Palace, as an incredibly well-run club, a stable Premier League club. They never seem to be in any particular relegation battle. At the same time, they don't seem to really be sort of looking upwards either. They're very content with being a mid-table club. But I'm sure Palace fans will welcome this news.
Yeah, and I think the news that's on the back of the paper there, the consortium that's looking to maybe buy the stake in the club, is actually being led by 2 Crystal Palace supporters. So you can imagine that if they do manage to acquire that stake in the football club, they're going to have the club's best interests at heart. And like you say, that they always seem to be a steady, well-run club. And the guy that bought his stake in 2021 for 90 million, and he's now looking to sell it for 230 million. So not a bad bit of business for him either.
Jonathan, here's your challenge. You've got 15 seconds to tell me everything you want about Crystal Palace.
Yeah, I mean, the fans are obviously not been happy with the ownership for a while, and this seems like a good deal for them. I just hope they can get a deal done for Rúben as well.
Even less than 15 seconds. What a professional. Fantastic. Thank you very much, guys, for your time this evening.